Oh, don't mind me, I was just playing some Pokemon Sun and Moon. You see, because it's such a good game with such good rivals. I'm joking. I mean, kind of. I mean, you'll see. Anyway, every Pokemon game has rivals, for better or for worse. Mostly worse. Rivals tend to be used as motivational tools to keep the player wanting to progress, and typically take the Pokemon League challenge at more or less the same pace as the player. Those are the basic parameters by which I'll be judging the rivals across all 7 generations. Do they succeed in challenging the player to be a better Pokemon trainer, or do they simply stumble through their journey aimlessly, making us question their meaningless existence? Sorry, I just really hated the X and Y rivals. There were 15-ish rivals to choose from for this list, depending on who you consider a rival, and honest to God, only 5 felt worth even talking about, so here you go! Top 5 Pokemon rivals! Number 5! For some reason, Pokemon has just been adding more and more rivals to each game over the years instead of just making the rivals actually good. Gen 3 had Wally and then Mayor Brendan, Gen 5 had Charon, Bianca, and N, and then there's Gen 6, the current record holder for generation with the most rivals, with a total of 4. Tierno, Trevor, Shauna, and either Callum or Serena, depending on if the player is a boy or a girl. The former 3 pretty much followed the trend of the incompetent one-dimensional trainer that the Pokemon rivals have been for the last several generations, but Callum and Serena were actually surprisingly impressive. For the purposes of this video, I'll be using Serena as my example because I played through as a boy, so this is going to reflect my experience with the game. Serena displays a level of competence right from the get-go. She obviously knows a thing or two about Pokemon and kind of serves as a non-invasive tutorial character, as in she's not following you around healing you after every battle. Her demeanor in general is more serious and she seems confident about her abilities. Apparently her parents are some kind of pro trainers, but what's interesting is when other characters bring it up, she dismisses it and says that they may be good, but that has nothing to do with her. It's respectable that she doesn't just ride her parents' coattails despite coming from a background where it might give her an advantage. Serena seems focused on getting stronger, testing her skills, and winning battles. I mean, as soon as you hit the first town, she says her goal is to go challenge the gym leader, which is probably your plan as well, so the game puts her on par with you in terms of wanting to make progress. I don't think Serena's a great rival, but I do think she meets the bare minimum qualifications. Someone who's taking the Pokemon League challenge alongside the player and serves as a motivational tool to keep the player moving. Don't worry, it gets better. Number 4! When I started up Sun and Moon and was introduced to my rival, Hugh, I gotta say I was pretty disappointed. I mean, this kid is admittedly awful at Pokemon, and he even chose the starter that's weak to yours. Come on, kid, get with the program! And I know I've talked about this before, but before anyone says anything along the lines of, that's because the player is the rival, I'd like to remind you that rivals come in pairs. So if you're his rival, he's also your rival. So you can't be the rival because you're both each other's rivals. Anyway, Hugh was really disappointing. And then this edgelord showed up. And I didn't really think of Gladion in terms of being a rival at first. He was clearly an antagonist and even had ties to the game's evil team, although now that I think about it, that's not the first time that's happened. So I just assumed he was another bad guy. But then I started to like Gladion and care about what he stood for. I felt like even though he was opposing me, he was someone who also gave a flying fuck about being a strong trainer. And then it hit me. Gladion is totally a rival! He's even listed on Bulbapedia as a rival, so that's enough evidence for me. You know who's not listed as a rival, though? Everybody's favorite husbando, sad boy, weeaboo-ass anime kid, N. Because in my opinion, N isn't a rival. But that's my opinion, don't hurt me. Anyway, Gladion is actually a pretty interesting dude. And by that I mean he's kind of a dick to you, like when you go visit him in his hotel room and he's just like, get out! Which is interesting because Pokemon games have definitely gotten more and more soft over the years with characters that just want to be friends, learn about Pokemon's dance moves, and bang their Gardevoirs. Anyway, Gladion is a pretty badass character with some actual depth and goals and motivation. He's way more integral to the plot than Hugh, and it's really cool when you realize you should be working together for a common cause and he ends up fighting on your side. And like, look at that outfit, man. I might accidentally cut myself on all that edge. Number 3! My favorite Pokemon games ever are Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Those games really nailed down the Pokemon experience in just about every aspect, and I know I wouldn't hold those games in such high regard if they didn't have a damn good rival. We all know Blue from Generation 1 is an asshole. Well, I think for Generation 2, possibly in an attempt to outdo themselves, the developers just decided to crank the asshole meter up to 11 for this guy. Silver would practically border on evil if it weren't for the fact that he seems to want to crush Team Rocket even more than you do. When you first meet Silver, he's spying through the window of Elm's lab, possibly fondling himself. That's still unconfirmed. And if you try to talk to him, he physically shoves you away. I mean, I'd be upset too if someone interrupted me doing my business. After you get your starter and head to Mr. Pokemon's house, Silver actually steals one of Elm's Pokemon to use in his quest to destroy Team Rocket. What's cool about Silver is that his character develops more than most characters in the entirety of the Pokemon series, a series full of very flat, one-dimensional characters. He starts out mean-spirited and power-hungry, and then when Lance whoops his ass in Mahogany Town and tells him he needs to start treating his Pokemon right, it puts him on a very long path of becoming a less shitty person. What's cool is he actually gets there. The game uses an incredibly clever device to convey this by having the Golbat that Silver's had on his team forever finally evolve into Crobat by the post-game, which only happens when Golbat reaches maximum friendship with its trainer. So he actually succeeds in treating his Pokemon with love and all that shit. And that's actually impressive for a kid who was abandoned by his father because his father's criminal syndicate collapsed. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Silver is Giovanni's son. And like I said, he was abandoned when Team Rocket fell. That's actually really sad, and it adds a lot of depth to Silver's character. So now that we're all nice and depressed, let's move on to number 2. Number 2! Well, I already said it. I see a lot of people hating on Hugh, and honestly, I have no idea why. To me, Hugh was an amazing breath of fresh air after 3 generations of ridiculous friend rivals. And while Hugh is the player's friend, he also has a ton of motivation to get strong, and that means challenging the player every step of the way. The way Hugh is presented is very reminiscent of the way rivals were presented to you in the earlier games. Here's this neighbor kid. What's his name again? Hugh's motivation is pretty much to wipe out Team Plasma for stealing his younger sister's Purloin that their deceased grandfather caught for her, and as a big brother, I could honestly say I would want to do the same thing. I just always loved how spirited and raw this kid was. Whenever Team Plasma would show up, he'd just rage at them so hard, always calling them dirty thieves and trash and talking about crushing them. He's a pretty hardcore kid. I think the way Hugh motivates the player is unique when compared to other rivals. You're just some kid on a Pokemon journey getting shit handed to you like a starter and a Pokedex, but Hugh has purpose. And at first, you don't even know what that purpose is, but he's got so much zest and you really want to help him do whatever he's trying to do. I was also a big fan of his design. Something about him just screams rival. Like, there was no question in my mind when I first ran into him. I was like, yeah, this dude's definitely my rival. There shouldn't be like 4 different people who might be your rival, because when your rival shows up, you should know. Anyway, I think his clothing looks very Pokemon trainer-esque, but his hair and facial features seem a little dark to be the usual happy-go-lucky protagonist. Like, this kid's seen some shit, and I mean, he kinda has. Number 1! If you've been watching this channel for long enough, you knew Blue was gonna take the number 1 spot. At the risk of sounding like a Gen 1er, there never has been and probably never will be a rival as perfect as Blue Oak. I mean, he basically defined what a rival is in Pokemon, so really this list was just top 5 Pokemon characters that are the most like Blue. Maybe that's a little unfair, but at least in my opinion, Blue did the absolute best job of any rival in Pokemon history of motivating the player to get good, and he does so through sheer antagonism. I mean, this dude set the precedent for pulling the dick move of choosing the starter that's strong against yours. A tradition which is still strong to this day. God damn it, how? And then he immediately challenges you to a battle. And get this, if you win, he says he picked the wrong Pokemon. But if he wins, he says, yeah, am I great or what? So basically, if he loses, he blames the Pokemon. And if he wins, he takes all the credit. What an ass! Then he, of course, exits with his signature smell you later and theme music. I mean, come on, the dude's got his own theme music. And that's actually a really effective aspect of having Blue as a rival. The music itself always interrupts whatever you're doing, which can really catch you off guard. Sometimes the last thing you want is another Pokemon battle, and in those moments, Blue delivers. The reason Blue is such a damn good rival is that the only power you have over him is the fact that you can beat him in a Pokemon battle. But even when you do, he doesn't care. Or if he does, he's not letting it show, which is infuriating. All other factors are in Blue's favor. His starter counters yours, he beats every gym before you, whenever you run into him, he's already done with whatever you're about to do, and of course by the end, he's already beaten the Elite Four and is the new champion. It really makes you want to kick his ass, so you do, and he doesn't care, and it makes you want to kick his ass even more, and you do, etc., until finally you beat him at the end of the game, and he admits to not understanding what he did wrong, and that moment right there just feels exquisite. Blue is the perfect rival in my opinion because he knows just how to get under your skin and makes you say, I'm gonna get strong so I can beat this douchebag's face in. And that's what I call motivation. Thank you guys so much for watching this video on my top 5 Pokemon rivals. You guys kind of picked this video because I posted a poll on Twitter saying, hey, what video should I do next? And you guys voted in favor of this one overwhelmingly. That's my segue to say, hey, follow me on Twitter and you'll get to vote on polls and see all the really irreverent, asinine shit I post, so that's fun. Of course, if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you guys gave this a little thumbs up. And if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like what you see, because I post content weekly. Yes, Weekly. I keep saying this, and you guys are leaving comments. You're like, you don't post weekly. And I mean, I know my track record's pretty shitty, but for the past 2 months, I have been, so...